Here's something that shouldn't make any financial sense. The housing market has become so expensive that millions of people can't afford to buy a home. And yet, buying a home could still be the smartest financial decision you ever make. At the exact same time, it could also become one of the biggest money mistakes of your entire life. In any normal market, the answer should be simple. If prices are high, you wait. If rates are high, you wait even longer. That's basic financial logic. And yet here we are. Some people who buy in 2026 will quietly build hundreds of thousands of dollars in wealth over the next decade. Others will buy almost the same house, in almost the same neighborhood, and spend years trapped by a decision they thought was responsible. If you've been browsing listings, comparing mortgage rates, or wondering whether you should finally stop renting, you've probably felt this contradiction already. Something about this market doesn't add up. The usual advice sounds confident, but it points in completely opposite directions. Today, we're going to break down exactly why this happens, what changed in the housing market to create this paradox, and the one calculation you need to make before signing anything, because in 2026, buying the wrong house could cost you far more than not buying one at all. To understand whether buying a house in 2026 is the right move, you have to rewind to the moment this entire chain reaction began. Because today's market wasn't created by chance. It was created by one extraordinary emergency. The year was 2020. The global economy suddenly slammed on the brakes, and policymakers responded with equally extraordinary measures. The Federal Reserve cut interest rates to nearly zero and began purchasing approximately $120 billion in Treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities every single month. The goal was simple: make borrowing incredibly cheap so the economy wouldn't freeze. And it worked. By January 2021, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate had fallen to 2.65%, the lowest level Freddie Mac had recorded since tracking began in 1971. Overnight, millions of Americans discovered they could suddenly afford much more house without increasing their monthly payment. Families who had planned to wait another 3 or 4 years rushed into the market. Investors piled in. Existing homeowners refinanced at rates that, in hindsight, now look almost impossible. Here's what made this so powerful. Imagine a $400,000 home with a 20% down payment. That leaves a $320,000 mortgage. At 2.65%, the monthly principal and interest payment is roughly $1,293. For many households, that transformed homeownership from a distant goal into an immediate possibility. Demand didn't just rise, it exploded. But the market had a problem almost nobody noticed at the time. Cheap money can create buyers overnight, but it cannot create houses overnight. New homes take years to build. Existing inventory was already limited. So millions of newly empowered buyers began competing for the same limited number of properties. That was the spark. Everything that happened afterward, soaring prices, affordability collapsing, and the impossible housing market you're seeing in 2026, was built on this single moment when the cheapest mortgage money in modern American history collided with a housing supply that simply wasn't prepared for it. The cheap money of 2020 lit the match. What happened next poured gasoline on it. At the start of the pandemic, millions of Americans discovered they no longer had to live near their offices. Remote work jumped from under 6% of workers to more than 18% almost overnight. Suddenly, a small apartment in an expensive city didn't make as much sense if your job could be done from anywhere. So people moved. Cities like New York, San Francisco, Chicago, and Los Angeles watched thousands of residents leave, while markets such as Austin, Phoenix, Boise, Nashville, and Tampa were flooded with buyers carrying historically cheap mortgage pre-approvals and pandemic savings. They weren't just looking for a different house. They were looking for home offices, larger yards, and more space. The numbers became extraordinary. Between March 2020 and March 2022, national home prices surged 37%. Austin climbed roughly 61%, Phoenix 59%, and Boise 53%. At the peak of the frenzy, nearly 6,000 homes in a single month sold for at least $100,000 above the asking price. Homes weren't just appreciating, they were becoming bidding wars. Then the next domino fell. By mid-2022, inflation had reached 9.1%, the highest level in 4 decades. To slow the economy, the Federal Reserve launched one of the fastest tightening cycles in modern history, raising its benchmark rate 11 times in just 16 months, from 0.25% to 5.50%. Mortgage rates followed immediately. The average 30-year mortgage climbed from 3.22% in January 2022 to 7.08% by October 2022, eventually reaching 7.79% in October 2023, the highest level since 2000. Think about what that meant. The same $320,000 mortgage that cost about $1,293 per month at the pandemic low rate now required roughly $2,320 per month. That's more than $1,000 extra every month, or roughly $363,000 more over the life of the loan, for the exact same house. Every domino triggered the next one. Cheap money created demand. Remote work shifted where people wanted to live. Prices exploded. Inflation forced aggressive rate hikes. And higher rates crushed affordability, just as home prices were sitting near record highs. The result wasn't just an expensive housing market. It was a market that had become almost impossible for the average buyer to navigate. At this point, you might expect home prices to fall. After all, higher mortgage rates should reduce demand. Fewer buyers should mean lower prices. That's how every economics textbook says this is supposed to work. But here's the part that should completely change the way you think about today's housing market. Demand didn't disappear. Supply disappeared with it. The invisible force holding this entire market hostage is something economists call the mortgage lock-in effect. Right now, roughly 51% of outstanding U.S. mortgages carry an interest rate below 4%, and about 20% are below 3%. If you bought or refinanced during 2020 or 2021, you're holding a financial asset that simply doesn't exist anymore. No bank can offer you that loan today. Now, imagine you're one of those homeowners. You'd like a bigger house. Maybe you've changed jobs, had another child, or simply want to move. But selling your current home means giving up a 2.75% mortgage and replacing it with one around 6.5%. On a $400,000 mortgage, that decision increases your payment by roughly $730 every single month, or about $87,600 over the next decade, just for moving. According to Federal Reserve researchers, the average financial penalty created by giving up it's frozen because millions of homeowners are financially trapped by the best mortgage rates they'll likely ever have, while millions of buyers are locked out by the worst affordability they've ever seen. Everyone is stuck, for completely opposite reasons. Statistics explain what's happening, but they don't tell you what it feels like to live through it. So, let's talk about someone we'll call Maya. Maya is 31 years old. She works in healthcare administration in a mid-sized city. She earns $74,000 a year, which is above the national median income. She has no credit card debt, a 760 credit score, and over the past 3 years she's managed to save $31,000 for a down payment. She skipped vacations. She kept the same car. She lived with a roommate longer than she wanted to. By every traditional measure, Maya did exactly what financial experts told her to do. Now, let's run the numbers. The median home she's looking at costs $385,000. She puts 10% down, leaving a mortgage of $346,500. At today's mortgage rate of around 6.5%, her monthly principal and interest payment comes to approximately $2,190. Then reality starts adding up. Property taxes, about $350 per month. Homeowners insurance, roughly $150. Maintenance and repairs, another $320. Her true monthly housing cost is now approximately $3,010. Maya brings home about $4,650 each month after taxes. That means housing alone would consume roughly 65% of her take-home pay. She would have only $1,640 left to cover groceries, transportation, utilities, health insurance, student loans, emergencies, and every other expense that comes with being an adult. She cannot afford this house. Not because she's irresponsible. Not because she bought luxury cars or maxed out credit cards. Because the math doesn't work. Financially, Maya is exactly the kind of buyer the housing market was built for. Yet the income needed to comfortably purchase the median home in her market is roughly $110,000 a year. She earns $74,000. That isn't a personal failure. It's a structural gap. And there are millions of people just like Maya. People who refresh Zillow every evening, hoping something changes. People who watch their rent increase while their down payment loses purchasing power. People who attend friends' housewarming parties, genuinely happy for them while silently wondering how they made the numbers work. The affordability crisis isn't just a headline. For people like Maya, it's a spreadsheet that says no, even after they've done almost everything right. If you've been looking at houses over the past year and wondering whether you're doing something wrong, you need to hear this. You're not failing at adulthood. The frustration you're feeling isn't the result of poor budgeting, a lack of discipline, or some personal financial mistake. It's the result of a market whose mathematics have fundamentally changed. Right now, the income required to comfortably purchase the median-priced home is roughly $106,000, while the median U.S. household earns about $83,700. Before you even compare neighborhoods, school districts, or mortgage lenders, there's already a gap of more than $22,000 built into the system. That gap isn't something you can fix by skipping coffee or canceling a streaming subscription. It's structural. That's why so many financially responsible people feel like they're running in place. They save diligently, improve their credit scores, avoid consumer debt, and still discover they're priced out of homes that would have been considered ordinary just a few years ago. The most dangerous thing you can do in a market like this is let the market's narrative replace your own numbers. Because every industry connected to housing has a financial incentive to tell you that now is always the right time to buy. Real estate agents earn commissions when homes sell. Mortgage lenders make money when loans close. Builders need inventory to move. Very few people get paid to tell you to wait. So, here's the decision rule that matters. If your total monthly housing costs, your mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, and other unavoidable expenses stay below roughly 28% to 30% of your gross income, and you expect to remain in the home for at least 7 years, buying can make financial sense. But if reaching that payment means stretching to 40% or 45% of your income simply because you're afraid of being left behind, the math doesn't suddenly become good math. It becomes expensive math. In some situations, continuing to rent while investing the difference can compete with, or even outperform, buying an overpriced home in a high-rate environment. That's not settling. It's making a financial decision based on reality instead of pressure. The goal isn't to own a house at any cost. The goal is to build wealth without becoming trapped by the very asset that was supposed to create it. At this point, it's easy to reach one conclusion. If housing is this expensive, doesn't that mean we're heading for another 2008? It's a reasonable question. But the answer is no, and understanding why is incredibly important if you're trying to make a smart decision in 2026. The housing market is under enormous pressure, but it isn't suffering from the same disease that caused the last crash. Back in 2006 and 2007, subprime mortgages accounted for roughly 18% to 21% of all new home loans. Banks approved borrowers with weak credit, little documentation, and loan products that became more expensive over time. Many buyers simply couldn't afford the homes they purchased. Today's market looks very different. Subprime lending now represents only about 4% of new mortgage originations, and the median credit score for new borrowers is around 758, roughly 50 points higher than before the financial crisis. Even more important is homeowner equity. In 2009, approximately 26% of mortgaged homes were underwater, meaning owners owed more than their properties were worth. That triggered forced sales, foreclosures, and a downward spiral in prices. Today, only about 2.2% of mortgages are underwater. American homeowners collectively hold approximately $35.8 trillion in home equity. The difference shows up in foreclosure numbers as well. During the 2008 financial crisis, the United States recorded roughly 2.3 million foreclosures in a single year. In 2024, that number was closer to 174,000. That's not a collapsing market. It's a constrained one. In 2008, The problem was that banks had lent too much money to people who couldn't realistically repay it. Today, the borrowers are generally qualified. The loans are far stronger. The problem is that qualified buyers still can't comfortably afford today's prices and today's interest rates. That's why calling this another 2008 misses what's actually happening. A market crash creates opportunities for buyers. A frozen market simply leaves everyone waiting. The people who want prices to fall often can't qualify for a mortgage even if they do. The people who could sell are financially trapped by historically low mortgage rates. That's what makes today's housing market so unusual. It's not fragile. It's stuck. So, where does all of this leave you? It leaves you with a decision that should be based on your numbers, not the market's headlines. The biggest mistake people make is assuming they have only two choices: buy immediately or miss out forever. Those aren't your choices. Your choice is whether the math works. Here's the rule. If your total monthly housing costs, including your mortgage payment, property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance, and unavoidable housing expenses, stay below roughly 28% to 30% of your gross monthly income, and you realistically expect to remain in that home for at least 7 years, buying can be a financially sound decision. If the numbers don't fit inside that framework, don't force them. Stretching to 40% or 45% of your income because someone tells you that real estate always goes up doesn't make the purchase smarter. It simply makes you more vulnerable. If you're buying in today's market, there's one additional area worth paying close attention to: new construction. Many builders are offering mortgage rate buydowns, in some cases reducing effective rates into the 4.5% to 5% range. Those incentives can make new homes surprisingly competitive with existing homes. Just make sure the lower rate isn't hiding an inflated purchase price. Always run the complete numbers before signing anything. The housing market you see today wasn't created overnight. It was built by the cheapest mortgage rates in modern history, the fastest rate hiking cycle in 4 decades, and more than a decade of underbuilding that left the country millions of homes short. No single policy, rate cut, or headline is going to solve a structural imbalance this large in 1 year. That's why the era of buying any house at any price and assuming appreciation will rescue every decision is over. Running the numbers isn't pessimism. It's financial discipline. If this video helped you understand why today's housing market feels so different, hit like and subscribe. Every week, we break down the real math behind the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make so you can build wealth based on facts, not financial myths.